Okay, the next film we're going to review is Emma. Carice, tell me a little bit about that film.
The very simple logline for Pablo Larraín's Emma would be a couple dealing with the aftermath of a decision to give up their adoptive son, Polo. However, Emma's husband, Gaston, who's played by Gael García Bernal, and the character of Polo, who is very much just spoken about and not really seen for a lot of the film, very rapidly drift into the background as Mariana di Girolamo's breakout performance as Emma, with a shock of slick back bleach white hair and luminescent clothing, charges into the center of the story. For me, this is very much a story about the character of Emma, as the title of the film would probably lead one to believe. So Emma's a reggaeton dancer, and there are points in the film where this is shown as a sign of an issue between Emma and her husband. There's a sort of battle between old and new here, I think. And this, both her job as a dancer very much kind of feeds into the whole aesthetic of the film. The film's sort of visual style is very colourful. It's set on a Chilean harbour city, Valparaiso, which itself is full of pastel, bright apartment blocks, and Emma's entire wardrobe, as well as that of her girlfriends that she spends most of the film sort of followed by an entourage. They all dress in incredibly vibrant, modern, youthful clothing. And also, the soundtrack to the film is done by Chilean-American music composer Nicholas Jar, who's quite well known for his electronic music EPs from probably early 2000s. So the film itself is sort of a dance film. It's got a lot of energy. It's got a really cool soundtrack, but then there is this thread of a kind of a thriller domestic drama running through that really only gets dealt with and revealed towards the very latter scenes of the film. What did you think of it, Amanda?
I absolutely well. I mean, it is a sad and somewhat dark story, but in terms of the look and feel and the emotions that I got from it, I really was captivated by it. I particularly really liked the main performances of the two characters, and I also really loved the lighting and the look and feel. It almost felt like James Turrell had, created this light art like on the city, of these scenes, and some of there's a montage of a sex scene where she ends up with many of her partners, and it was all in this blue light, and I just thought it was really well done. I also think when we were talking about a couple films this week about the intimacy and isolation of the family unit, and I felt like that was really handled exceptionally well. Like, you kind of felt the loneliness within this couple a lot of times, and they're just by the way that it was filmed and the silence around that, or it was really beautiful. But I also particularly loved the dance scenes. I think they kind of pulled you out, and they almost felt like you were in a music video, but in a way that wasn't stunted. It didn't stunt the story. It progressed it, and I thought it was super well done. The only other film I've ever seen that he's directed is Jackie, and I didn't enjoy that film as much as this one, so I was delightfully quite surprised and really enjoyed it, and want to see some of his other stuff that he did before.
Yeah, I was wanting to see what Amanda made of it, because I knew that you disliked Jackie. I thought you actually disliked it really intensely. It wasn't just you didn't enjoy it. I thought you hated it. You've used the phrase "I hated that film."
Yeah, I didn't like it at all, and it's particularly because I have a bias against Natalie Portman, and I really love watching Natalie Portman films because I expect to dislike them. But I particularly didn't like Jackie, and there are other films she's done that I think are fine, but I just didn't think it was very well done. I can't. I'd have to go back and watch why I really didn't like it. I just remember. I remember going to Alamo Drafthouse as well to see it the first time I've ever been there, and very just nostalgic right now about the fact I can't go to the Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn.
It's interesting that you mentioned the dance sequences and like it in a good way taking you out of it a bit, because I actually agree, and I think it works very well with the story, because it's almost dealing, like, most of the time throughout the story, like, basically the Emma character is dealing with, it's really a form of grief, right? It's the like her, she feels like she's in some way failed Polo, this kid, and it's causing all sorts of ructions with her and her husband, Gaston, I think, Gael García Bernal's character. And it's basically all the different ways in which she's really acting out, I suppose, or expressing herself, and kind of like the only way she can find to deal with that. So the fact that the dance sequences actually do kind of take out the story is almost, it really serves to emphasize that, because that's her main mode of expression. That's how she kind of like separates herself from that. And it's only when you get later into the film, basically that kind of, the veil drops and you actually begin to see sort of like a more direct dealing with it. I was also struck by the look of the film. I thought the use of color in this, I thought, was absolutely fantastic. In particular, so there are a lot of sex scenes in this film, and they are color coded according to kind of like what sort of emotion or what the Emma character is experiencing at the time. And I think it really is quite something. It would be very easy to look at it on the surface and think that it's maybe more style over substance, but I don't think it is. I think it is actually pretty good visual storytelling. And using the idea of the colours of the scenes and the colour grading to convey emotion and tone, which is really the bedrock of this story. I mean, that's what it all largely resides in, and it does that in a variety of different visual ways. There's the dance sequences, there's the way in which the Gaston and Emma are shot, there's the colours that we've spoken about, and I've got to say I'm doing pretty well with the films that we're reviewing for this show, because I was pretty impressed with it. I did enjoy it. I also quite like there's an argument scene where Gaston and Emma are arguing, which features Gael García Bernal rolling R's like an absolute champion, which I enjoyed. It's a slightly more frivolous one, but yeah, I enjoyed the film. I thought it set out to do everything it wanted to really pretty well, I think.
I thought the other thing that was quite interesting, and we talked about this with The Assistant, which we reviewed last time, was that you can see, and there's this like you said, it's really about grief, but at the same time you don't actually meet the child very often, or it's only near the end that you kind of get to see her being with the child that she had given up. So I thought it was interesting that character was somewhat removed from most of the story, or only seen kind of at afar.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the way that he decides to structure the narrative, that you've got them very much dealing with the aftermath, but it feels like he's still sort of there. So there's like these occasional cutaway scenes where you see the child in a setting with other people, and it doesn't tell you this, you don't hear anyone say his name to him. You can only assume that this is the child that has caused this massive rupture in their lives and in their relationship. But you don't, the way in which they talk about him, and the way in which they're still having these conversations with their family about him, it feels really like it's still very like raw. It's still very much there. Like the scene where they open the freezer and just is one of the crimes that they've attributed to this young boy as to why they've decided to give him up. It feels like he's still, the impact of him is still sort of rippling through their lives. Like they're not even past the point of the impact, and then definitely not in that stage of like proper mourning yet. And I guess like there's probably part of me, and I don't necessarily know whether a value judgment is needed, but it does feel at the end that this child is not necessarily going to be in good care with these two people. I think the they sort of very deliberately create the worlds of both Emma and Gaston as, you know, they're very tempestuous, very fiery, very clashing individuals, and their whole world, like the I think part of the aesthetic that he creates, their whole world is incredibly fraught. It's fiery. There's fire just constantly throughout it. It doesn't feel like a healthy world for a child. So you've kind of got these two things where you've got a couple who are struggling with a child that showed signs of kind of behavioral issues, but the parents themselves are definitely kind of showing similar behavioral issues. So
yeah, when the film opens with Emma in kind of like welder's get up, basically having flamethrower to set a traffic lights, I think you're pretty clued into the fact that she's not going to be, you know, not going to be kind of like a nice stable level, you know, everything's calm.
Yeah, but and I guess I sort of like that. I like that kind of subverting of the maternal figure, because if she very much is, like, she is clearly, as you say, Amanda, she is clearly very much mourning the loss of this child. She's on this kind of this mission to kind of fix what she maybe thinks is a wrong decision. She very quickly reacts negatively to anyone, and it's Gaston primarily who does this, saying that she's a bad mother, or kind of poking at this idea that she was a bad mother. And you, through some of the lines in the films, you know that that her and Polo clearly had a very close and nurturing relationship, but she is also wild and crazy, and she's, you know, she's sleeping around, and she's going to parties, and she's dancing through the city, and there's a real vibrancy to her, as well as having a kind of maternal side, which I think is quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, and not to give anything away, but that scene, there's a scene when I feel like the two families meet, and I've just, it was so well done, but so uncomfortable. And amazing what one person can do. You know,
yeah,
like...
and her eyes, she communicates so much through her eyes. The Mariana, who plays Emma, she just, you know, you can see who she's looking at, and you can, you know, everything that's going on inside her head in terms of like this scenario that she has constructed.
Yeah. Really interesting. I think it's worth a watch. And like I said, I'm interested in seeing some of his other work now. I think it looks great. It's well acted, and it's a beautiful film, if a bit dark and unsettling.
What are the other films he's done? Because there's Jackie, and then I think there's Neruda.
Yeah, he did a film called No that also has Gael García Bernal, I believe. Okay. And a film called The Club, I want to say, but I might be wrong. But I think Jackie's his only full English language film, and is for me also the only other film of his that I've seen. And I think just so starkly different. I feel like Jackie's very, like, because of the setting that it's in, it's really cold, and it's really kind of stoic, I guess. Whereas there's like, you know, larger than life kind of vibrancy to Emma that dragged me right in. And obviously I mentioned Nicholas Jar earlier. He's one of my favorite music composers. I've always been a great fan of him, and I think this film, similarly to Victoria, that came out a couple of years ago, that was soundtracked by Niels Fram, about sort of Berlin club scene, but also has like a drama thriller kind of narrative to it. I think it sort of fits in that kind of thing, where if someone's a fan of the music and a fan of dance and a fan of, you know, watches music videos, this is totally a film that would work for them. And also there's like a really kind of juicy thriller drama narrative to kind of get stuck into as well.
It's interesting that like you, Chris, the only other film of his I've seen is Jackie. And it's quite interesting. It makes quite a good comparison with that, because it's like you said, like Jackie's all about the kind of the stoicism and almost kind of like swallowing your grief. Whereas this is, it's basically the complete opposite. It's all right out there. The emotions are raw. They're out on the table. They are, done in saturated lights of color, and there's flamethrowers, and there's arguments, and like the two characters, Emma and Gael, they torture each other basically. They have a couple where they really go for the jugular with each other over these like little things about the kids. So it is interesting that those are the only two films of his that I and you have seen, because there's some overlap in terms of what it's trying to deal with, but it's expressed so very differently. It's really quite a contrast. I think it maybe speaks to his versatility as a director, and also the performances in the film. But yeah,
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some more of his films. He's clearly got a good visual eye.
Great. So you can watch Emma on Mubi starting the 2nd of May, and as you hear, we really like it, so we hope you check it out.